Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of the LeanTossup CDL betting podcast. I am joined with Ryan of CDL Metrics, and we're here to talk about Stage 5 Major, which is coming up this weekend. How you doing, Ryan?
I'm doing well. It's kind of weird how fast the season's moved along. We're already at Major 5, and then we have champs, and then we're kind of done. I mean, we are done for, I don't even know how long until the next COD comes out and they get the league set up for that. But yeah, for now, I'm excited to talk about Major 5. We have a pretty interesting bracket, I think. Some things that jump off the page right away, which I know we'll get into deeper as we go along, but like FaZe does not have a winners round one bye. They actually have to play in winners round one, which I believe they did earlier this year at some point, but it's just weird to see them on that first line. And then on another note, like New York subliners, obviously they've had their struggles lately, but to see them in losers bracket round one is just kind of shocking to see, although they have an easy matchup too. So just looking at the bracket first glance, it looks like it could be a fun one just to see how this all shakes out. But yeah, I'm really excited to talk about it.
Yeah, actually, yeah, I'm excited to talk about it too. And yeah, it really feels like this season just the end of the season just kind of come out of nowhere at us. I mean, it just feels like a couple weeks ago we were looking at the All Star game, and then there was Stage 4, and then all of a sudden, then we're talking about teams' last games because like they're being with them being eliminated. So it's just been a crazy ride, and we're finally here at the end. And you wish it was longer, and you wish you could see these teams at champs, or you wish champs was more than like 10 games in a weekend. But it is what it is, I guess, at this point, and probably looking at a format change next year. Pros keep talking about that, so we'll see calls from the pros for a tournament a month or so after the game comes out, so maybe we'll see that. Don't know if we will because the CDL loves to try to avoid immediately competing with the NFL. So maybe we'll have to see. Because if you do about a month after the game release, you're then kind of getting into bowl season, Christmas season. I don't think the CDL is going to want that. But I mean, who knows? Maybe they'll just try it and go with it. But you made a really cool point there about FaZe having to play winners round one. It's actually a really cool stat here. If you look at games that the top teams have played, you have FaZe playing 39 games or matches. FaZe have played 39 matches. Dallas Empire has played 41, and Toronto has also played 41 games. So, although it's like that's it's not a huge difference, it's a difference of 2 games. Generally, the top teams play more games. So we're looking at a weird scenario where FaZe, even though they've made all four, probably five, all four major finals at this point, they've actually played less games than the top two teams. Not because they sucked, but because they did so well that they kept getting those buys. They
Yeah,
literally,
that's a heck of a stat, actually. Yeah.
yeah, like because generally you'll see a team they'll like generally if a team isn't like the most dominant team, sometimes maybe sometimes they'll fall into the losers bracket and play a couple extra games. But FaZe has gotten every single round one bye except for this one, and I believe Major 3 against subliners. That was the only time they didn't get. That's the only time they didn't get the bye. So that means, and that they've never dropped to the losers outside of the winners bracket finals against New York. So that was only one extra game from there. So yeah, like they've played 3 extra games than they theoretically could have. That's it. Which is just an insane stat, and it's just so crazy that's because generally the amount of games a team has played is correlated to a standing. Like for example, Seattle Surge has only played 32 games, and yet FaZe has played 39 games at the top of the league by a mile. So it's just a crazy stat. It's crazy how dominant Atlanta FaZe is. And I think even more scary is the fact of if Atlanta FaZe doesn't break up after this year, if this is the new look of the league, how like again we're near the end and obviously we're gonna have conversations about this in the off season, but like if FaZe is the new benchmark, if FaZe is the new starting line, and again a lot of the players on the team are pretty young. You got RCDs who's a bit up there, but like Simp and Abizi and Celium are all pretty young. Like if that's the new benchmark, you have to 12, like 11 teams have to meet that benchmark, and some of these teams aren't even going to come close. Like you have to find such a high level quality of a team to even start competing with FaZe, and at that point they just have a whole nother gear. Like it is scary if that's the new benchmark that all these teams are going to have to meet in 2020. we'll call it 2022 in 2022, right?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, I agree completely. Also with, expansion, we may get, an extra 4 teams into the league. That's still, to be determined, but if that's the case, obviously we'll get to see more amateur players that we haven't really got a chance to see this year compete, which is good to see, but at the same time, it's like if FaZe is still FaZe, then the league as a whole, like the hierarchy of teams doesn't change much. It's like FaZe, clear number one. Yes, they can lose every now and then. We saw that last week, but or the week prior. But it's like you have this one team up top, and then it's like, okay, well, now we're either going to need to like make super teams, which I feel like already kind of exists. Like I think right, Chicago was kind of built in a way of like, okay, this is a very very good team that could compete at the top of the league, and they're still although they beat FaZe in their last matchup, like they just never showed that dominance that FaZe has throughout the year. So we could get a similar situation if the teams kind of play out how they did this year of just it's FaZe and everybody else. I hope that's not the case. I hope, players like superstars, all stars from other teams team up and kind of switch it around and we'll see what we get. But yeah, we don't even know really how the new COD's gonna play out, so that could have a huge impact, right? Like Cold War just might be like Simp and Abizi's best game, and like granted they're amazing, like maybe the best two players in the world. But maybe Cold War is significantly better for them than the next COD later this year. So there's a lot to be determined, but I mean, yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking for going forward as we get to the end of this year and into the new COD. So yeah,
That's a good point about individual games too. My full expectation for this, and it's a bit of a hot take, but I feel pretty confident in it because we heard so much about the development process of this game, like not looking good, and then it was announced, I think, in like January or so that they were going to they were reusing the Modern Warfare. They were going to use the Modern Warfare 2019 engine. I would not be surprised if this is just like a World War II reskin of Modern Warfare. I think that's what this is going to be. And
could be. Yeah,
and if that's the case, then suddenly this team looks a little less scary. This is suddenly a team who in 2019, yeah, they were a really good team. Far from a dominant team. They had a nasty streak of losing in finals. They had a nasty streak where they took everybody to 5 games for a while in there. Now, granted, of course, they didn't have RCs. They were rolling with Major Maniac and Priest in a 5v5. But like, it's very possible that like with the Krieg so powerful, and with, I mean, the AK-47U is nowhere near as powerful as that MP5. That MP5 was ridiculous. But I mean, it's still not a bad weapon. Like it's still a very powerful thing, and maybe if you get, because every once in a while they'll pull out a Krieg. So it's very possible that if we get kind of like basically a Modern Warfare, if we go back to basically Modern Warfare, same movement, same everything as that. I think it's possible that if you do natural decline, plus you get a lot of better team building on some of these, because again, so hopefully some of these managements will start making some smart decisions, and obviously that's a conversation for another day. But I kind of think that what we're gonna have to do is that I think the best teams, you're either gonna get the best players, or you're gonna have a bunch of teams try to pay a premium for players who aren't as good but have a big name. And I think what the smart teams are going to do is just like, if you're one of these bottom teams, and we'll talk about them in a second, but like if you're Seattle, get rid of all 4 people, go like 4 challengers and like maybe someone who's maybe a veteran, and that's it. Like go 3 challengers and like, I don't know, just a veteran, and then that's it. Like roll with that. Like why are you gonna, like, you could try to get like a named player from a while ago, but like there is no point. Like get someone who's brand new, who has a much higher ceiling than like silly or assault or something. Like don't get like, because like you're gonna see like people like the bottom teams are gonna get dissolved, and then people are gonna kind of go off, pick over the scraps of what's left of that, and like don't just get brand new blood into the league.
yeah, I agree completely. I'm interested to see how it all plays out, and but right now we got to talk about Major Five, right?
Yes.
And yeah, let's see how this one goes because I'm excited. I'm ready for it.
Okay, so kicking off Major 5 Thursday afternoon. Again, it's nice to have 4 games on a day again.
It
Um,
is
it is
so
nice.
nice.
We're gonna hopefully next season. we get 4 games a day. Because and that might be one of the problems with it too. It's random tangent. We'll get to the games in a second, but I kind of feel one of the reasons why viewership is down is if you're only doing 2 3 games a day. If like one of those games sucks, it just ruins everything. Because you're like, why am I watching? It's like, oh, Seattle and Dallas are playing. It'd be like, okay, and then
Wonder what's gonna happen.
yeah, and then
Yeah.
it's like, oh, and then Toronto LAG is playing after that. Okay, well, I mean, this what if one game is bad, if there's multiple games, people can kind of come back in and do a second game. But if there's just 2 bad games, then people are like, these games all suck. Why am I here? But
Yeah, yeah. Part of what makes like sports days exciting, like an NFL Sunday, is that there's constantly games on all day. And like, I mean, the COD League doesn't have enough teams, I think, to just run like 6 matches at once. And yeah, that'd be probably not great for viewership, maybe. But like, yeah, like load up less days with more matches. And like teams want to play multiple times a day, even like you hear it all the time. And you see it at majors, like, when Toronto Ultra went on that crazy run in Major 2 and won it, it's like, well, they got to play, and I mean Dallas almost did it at the land major. Like, yeah, you can just get hot on a day and play COD the whole day. And like, yeah, teams don't really like having a day off to game plan for a team and then playing one match on that day and then, oh, you lose, you're eliminated, or you play someone else, or you win and you got to wait another day to play. Like, it's fun when everything's moving very quickly. Like, yeah, it just more matches on less days makes so much sense. And yeah, I'm not really sure why they stuck with the whole, 2 games Thursday, 2 games Friday, 3 games on the weekend kind of thing. But it is what it is, and yeah, hopefully they'll switch it up for next year.
yeah,
Also,
definitely.
with more teams, like
Yeah,
it just makes sense that they'd have to. So
I mean, ideally, I'd love it if we did like instead of five, everybody plays 5 games, and like you play 2 week games 1 week. Like honestly, it's fine to give teams a bye week or so. Like if you started running like if you go up to like 16 teams, you run like everybody plays each other in their group like twice, and then you play cross division once, which is fine because it's not like this isn't the NCAA. It's not like you're going to the swamp or Death Valley in LSU, right? Like there you can it's fine. There's no real home field advantage here. But if you like just that would be a massive amount of games, and then that would be a stage, and maybe you have a couple stages, and you stage playoffs and stuff like that. And if you could for that point you could easily run 4 time slots. You could run 2 games a time slot. That would be so many games. And the nice thing is, at that point, if a game sucks, you can change the other game. That's what the NFL has, right? There's like 6 games at 1 o'clock, right? If you're watching like the Packers Lions, and if you're like a Packers fan, and then the Packers go up 17, you're like, oh cool. Now I'm gonna go check out the Dallas Philly game. But like you can't do that. You can't do that here because there's no other games. You're just watching this game until its conclusion. And if like someone loses the hard point by like 150 points, well, you're gonna have to tough it out through the search and the control. So, but anyway,
yeah, yeah.
we have to talk about the games. So, all right, game one, Thursday afternoon, Seattle versus Paris. Seattle minus 175 on the money line. That's the Lantane hype. Paris plus 125. Seattle minus 1.5 plus 150. Paris plus 1.5 minus 200. Over 4.5 maps plus 150. Under 4.5 minus 200. This is my model actually has Paris favored, but my model does not realize that Octane supposedly is better on LAN.
Yeah, same exact same thing. So I have Paris as like the slightest of favorites. I have them winning this matchup 51% of the time. So that's about as narrow as it gets.
I got
I will
54. I got 54, so not much better.
Okay. Okay, so we're in the same ballpark. So obviously it's a coin flip match, but yeah, I think the line is set where it is just because of what we saw with Seattle at the last major. And I said this before that major, like LAN will be way overhyped. Like I said, there's probably going to be a team or two who like exceed expectations, and all we're talking about is like, oh my god, this player or that player on LAN is different. And then you're going to remember that. And now going into this major, you're going to like that's baked into this line already. And you're gonna I said, at Major Four, there's gonna be a team or two that shows up and that struggles a lot. And maybe we won't remember that as much as we will the guys who dominate on land, but you know, that sort of dynamic exists. And I think that number for Seattle is way too high. I don't know. Like, I'm not uncomfortable betting Paris at that line. 'Cause, I mean, Paris is just a tough team to figure out, as is Seattle sometimes. But like Paris last week, they lose two matches close. They 2-3 both times, and yeah, they're right there. They're in the same tier as Seattle Surge. Yes, I think Seattle may be a better land team. Obviously, we have that data point that says they are probably better than Paris on land. But again, it like shouldn't shock you if Paris come out and win 3-1 because Seattle's just that team that might flop.
Yeah, I completely agree. This line actually started with, I believe it was Seattle as a slight favorite. It leveled out, and now Seattle's a bigger favorite. Money is coming in on some of these games. Some movement in some other money lines we'll talk about in a second. But um, but no, like if this line goes higher, you get to Paris plus 150. You get to Paris plus 1.5 at like minus 120, plus 100, plus one. If you get the plus 1.5 at plus money or close to plus money, like it's minus 200 now, that gets to plus 100, plus 120. Yeah, bet that. Because I could see people just going insane on Seattle hype. And again, we got a couple days, so I'd wait this one overnight. But if that plus 1.5 is near even, like I'd very much consider taking a shot at it.
Yeah,
So
I couldn't agree more. I
so
don't think this will be
but
a great match in
no.
terms of like viewership, but yeah, I think it'll be pretty good if you decide to pick on Paris. So
Yeah. I the thing of it is I think I don't like this game will be bad, and like either team could win this, and Seattle just destroyed Paris in the last major. But I mean, we'll see. This is kind of like a don't put the result of this in every parlay. Like it's like there's some value on Paris, but like not a lot of value. And Seattle's is
right.
kind of like team where they're like, oh, after their last win they're like, oh, we're just gonna have fun. And again, they beat LAG 3-0, so that's not really there's not like really the biggest upset there, but like they're just balling out and having fun, and Paris seems to be a bit struggling after that London match, but they did come back to game 5, so we'll have to see. But anyway, moving on to the next game, New York Subliners without Clayster, probably without Clayster for this. We don't know yet 100%, but probably without Clayster. Subliners minus 500, LAG plus 333, Subliners minus 1.5 minus 225, LAG plus 1.5 plus 162, over 3.5 minus 200, under 3.5 plus 150. It might be hard for viewers to believe, but there's actually value on New York in this line. There is still value. Like I have New York as like a minus 400 and LEG is like a plus 400. So like I mean maybe not so much necessarily on New York, but like there is still like New York is actually perfectly fine to bet at this already pretty high price. Um,
Yeah, the one thing you have to worry about though is like LAG. Now, you probably don't have to worry about it if they cared, because I don't think they do. But like, now it's the major. Now, are they going to decide to show up? Probably not, but maybe there's that in them. But you got to think New York is like all they're thinking is we're going to 3-0 LAG. Like, but at the same time, like maybe it's a look ahead spot for New York. Like they're already, looking forward to their next match. It'd be against Mutineers. Like, are they getting that confident? And there's the roster drama with Clayster now and that sort of thing. And I don't know. It's like this is as much of a stay away for me, at least, as a game can get. Just because LAG, like obviously, you have no confidence in betting them, and the number even feels like plus 333 doesn't, like, who is picking that? I don't know anyone. So yeah, it can be kind of trappy. Maybe it's like a New York 3-2. Like that would surprise me too if it ended up like that. But um yeah, I have no feel for this game whatsoever, and I mean I'll be tuning in to see how it plays out. But like I I seriously, like, it wouldn't shock me if LAG gets swept, but it would shock me if like New York looks bad too. I don't know. It's a tough call.
In terms of New York, I jumped on immediately. I got the -1. I got the -1.5 at -163. So I like the second I saw this line, I took it
Yeah.
and I threw it in a parlay with phase -1.5, ultra -1.5. It's a cool plus 230. Uh, so that was nice. I took that. But that being said, though, like it could go badly, but it's like the thing of it is there's two things in my mind competing for this. One, at some point, LEG by the law of large numbers should win a hard point. Like they will try and maybe they will succeed, I don't know, but at some point they theoretically should win a hard point. That being said, you see their scrims posted on Twitter and they keep losing, they lose most hard points to challengers teams. Like they and it's not some of them aren't particularly close. Like maybe they'll win one out of the five hard points to to a challengers team, which is disgraceful and shameful and should not be a pro team. Um, but that being said, though, this subliners team, it feels off. Honestly, to me, the subliners team, and this will come off as maybe a dig at like a seam or Hydra. It's not meant as a dig at a seam at all. But this feels like this feels like a challengers team. This feels like a really young team that doesn't necessarily have a leader. I know Asim's trying, and I love Asim. Asim's a great player, and Hydra's great too, but it's just I'm not the biggest fan of Diamond Khan. I'm not the biggest fan of Mac. There's no particular veteran leadership on this team. It just feels like it feels like it has a pieces missing, and obviously it does because Clayster is supposed to be on this team, but he's not. It just feels like some pieces that are missing. But that being said, don't see problems against LEG. They should win this game pretty cleanly.
Yeah, yeah. I'm curious to see if Clayster does decide to come back. I thought initially he was just gonna sit out for like the last two matches of stage five and then come back for the major. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, if he's not back, I mean, you really worry about their chances. I mean, obviously in this major, it's gonna be tough for them starting in losers round one, but I don't know. It's just Clayster not being on the team matters a ton. Probably even more so than if Simp like needed a week off for FaZe and they subbed in whoever. Like I think FaZe would be okay because they're a well structured team that like leadership is shared amongst the group. So like, and I guess Arcides maybe is like the actual in game leader type guy. But like I don't know if there's another player close to Clayster's level of just sheer importance to his team. So that's what worries me. I do think obviously the players on New York, even though they're, a challengers esque team, like I think they're all still better than all of LAG. And like you said before, like LAG loses challengers teams all the time. So how is this going to be different? I don't think it will be. Um, with all that being said, it's going to be an LAG 3-0 probably,
Yeah.
and it'll be the most surprising thing to have happened all year.
Yep, they'll be like, we're not going home yet, and then immediately lose 3-0 to Florida. So
Yeah.
next up is actually quick point on that. I think you're saying players that would be most effective. I think the next most after Clay would probably be Krim
Yeah,
because
I can see that.
that's like the next one when you're thinking about players like that. I think the next one would be Krim, and like maybe after that Insight, but he's not. He's important, but he's like they can probably you just put methods
Yeah,
back in.
Toronto's built in a way where it's like they are all like I don't know if there's necessarily one dude on that team who's like shot calling everything like Clay would be or like Krim would be. So yeah, I mean Clayster sitting for New York is just obviously it's been really rough. So I'm curious to see when he comes back.
Well, the rumor and Asim basically said this rumor on the flank is that and he confirmed this that this was what was happening, that Clay basically left because there was tension with the team and Clay was basically like, if I leave, you guys will suck. So I'm gonna leave now to prove to you that I'm right and that you need to do what I say. And I mean they beat Paris, they lost to Phase 3-0. But I mean, if this is a team that has is like fu Clayster for leaving us, then like this team could go on a bit of a run, and that would probably start by beating LAG by at least 2 games, hopefully. Fingers crossed.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we'll see. Next up, we got FaZe versus Rocker. FaZe is minus 800 on the money line. Rocker plus 450. Minus 1.5 on FaZe, minus 334. Minnesota plus 1.5, plus 240. FaZe over 3.5, minus 163. Under 3.5, plus 120. Um, this line just feels short. Well, it's it just feels short. Like I just I took the -1.5 immediately because I don't see Minnesota covering the -1.5. Like maybe they knock off a hard point or a control or a search maybe, but Phase is now just like they're pissed off that they lost to Optic. They're this is now their like revenge tour. They're like we're gonna just like destroy every team that comes in our way.
Yeah, I agree completely. It always is kind of funny every time I punch in a hypothetical Atlanta versus, any other team just to see what numbers come out. And against Minnesota, they have about a 90% chance to win according to my model. And like at first glance, it's like, wait, really? And then you remember, like, okay, wait, Atlanta has won, like 80, what, 6, 87, 88% of their matches this year, just all of their matches. And then you think about, like, okay, their strength of schedule is probably a little harder than the average team just because, they get to a major and they play a lot of games, and the teams they play are good teams. So you factor that and you go, okay, so maybe they should actually be a little bit better than that. And then you factor in like Minnesota, who are a middling team, and then it's like, oh yeah, 90% isn't like a crazy number to, imagine. So honestly, yeah, the number, the -800, the -334, those are about right. I agree with you. It's really hard to see Minnesota taking two maps unless they get a really good map pool. But I mean, at a major, are you gonna get that? We see Atlanta do it all the time, during a stage where uh, you know, average to below average teams, they'll play those teams on, their bad maps or on those teams' good maps, I should say. Atlanta's bad maps, like they don't have any bad maps, but the maps that they could use work on, they'll play on those. At a major, I really don't think that's going to come through. You're going to have to play Atlanta on whatever they decide to play on that day, which is just a whole nother level of like strategy that goes into why Atlanta is amazing. It's like when you're good at pretty much every map and mode, minus a couple, like you can kind of do whatever you want in terms of map vetoes because like Rocker are gonna have whatever the heck they veto all the time, like checkmate control, that sort of thing. So it's like if you're Atlanta, it's like, okay, well then we get to decide, like, do we want to practice garrison control or do we want to practice raid? What do we match up better against versus Rocker on those maps? So there's just so many things that go in Atlanta's favor that it never ceases to amaze me. With all that being said, like, yes, Atlanta will win. I think they'll probably win 3-0 again, as they tend to do. Um, but it wouldn't shock me at all if it's a 3-1. I think that's almost as likely as a sweep in this series. So yeah, in Atlanta -1.5, I don't hate, but like, I don't know. The numbers on Atlanta are just always so high that like it's just not worth it. But if you really want it, then go get it.
Yeah, I don't know. The line just feels short. This feels like this should be like an Atlanta -1,000, but I don't know. We'll have to see. Again, this Minnesota team, if they do worse than like Florida at this major or Thieves in this major, like this could be like Minnesota. If they do worse than this, Minnesota could be 3 games away from their season ending.
Yeah,
And like I said this last week, but like it's just like I'm not in love with this team. I'm not completely sure how they beat Florida 3-0. It was a weird set of circumstances, I guess. Like Florida just came out really flat after losing to Toronto. I guess it was just like they do weird. It's weird. I'm not completely in love with this team, and definitely not against FaZe. So we'll have to see. Anyway, moving on. Last game of Thursday, Toronto versus Thieves. Toronto -275 on the money line. That disrespect. Um, Thieves +200. Toronto -1.5 at -120. Thieves +1.5 -120. Toronto over 4.5 +175. Thieves under 4.5 -250. Um, there's one thing Toronto does really well, and that is destroying LA Thieves.
yeah.
And like that's actually true. Like it's like half a joke, but like it is legitimately true that I think they've not lost to Thieves all year. They lost, I think, one map to Thieves, and that was a Miami, which is Toronto's worst map. which like Lord knows why they were even playing Miami against Thieves, but like it is these have been not these are some of the most blowout games we've seen all year when Toronto plays LA Thieves. This is the 250-14 raid. This is I think it was a checkmate that was also not particularly close. Like these are brutal. These have been
Yeah.
some of the most brutal beatdowns we've seen all year.
Yeah, totally agree. I don't hate the -1.5 for Toronto if you're gonna do either that or
And
just
it's
straight
actually
up to
come
win.
it's come down too. Like that's
Which
that
yeah, that
opened at
doesn't
-163 and it's down to -120. I have it in my old bet as -163. I want to re-up now. I will
yeah,
wait
that
for it to level off, but like who's betting on
yeah.
Thieves plus 1.5?
Well, the thing is, like with Thieves, all year I've mentioned how they're the trickiest team to figure out, right? Like they make so many roster moves that make sense, some that don't make sense. You know, when you're down on them, then they overperform. When you're way high on them, then they underperform. And I think we're now in the cycle where it's like people have expectations for Thieves. And Toronto, coming off a loss to Dallas, like, oh, maybe Toronto's coming down a little bit. And people talk themselves into like, this could be an upset. And maybe they just want it to happen, but like, yeah, you're right. Like, Thieves are just the opposite of what you think they are. Like, it would not shock me if they lose to Toronto. I think maybe like 3-1. Like, maybe they take a map. I don't know what it'd be, but 3-1. And then they get knocked down to losers and they have to play like Florida or New York. And they get bounced after that. And it's like, oh, so Thieves had a pretty good stage 5. And then they got to the major and just threw up on themselves. And like, yeah, it's like, yeah, that totally makes sense. Now, I'd like to have like I want them to be a good team just because I want more good teams in the league. But like not a good match against Toronto. Last time we saw them, this time I don't think they'll be quite as bad. I mean, it's hard to be worse than what we saw last time, but my goodness. Yeah, a Toronto 3-1. I think it could be 3-0 even. Like I think Toronto are going to want to bounce back after that Dallas loss, and this is a good team to do it against. So give me Toronto.
Yeah, if for the CDL for the CDL broadcast, if one of their keys to the game for LA Thieves isn't John remembering how to spell his name, then they have failed. They have failed in their job at providing entertainment. Um, but no, I mean, I don't know where I mean, Thieves is again a pretty public team, so they're doing this, and people will bet on them. That's fine, but like, and I also I in my mind, like, okay, fine. I accept that Thieves beat Optic, but like in my mind, like they did not beat Optic. Like I still don't understand how they beat Optic. Like Optic was so dominant in the first two maps. And like usually when we talk about like a reverse sweep, it's like, oh, LEG got up 2-0 against Dallas and Dallas reverse swept them. And maybe they'd be even favored if LEG got up 2-0, then Dallas would be favored to reverse sweep them. But like we don't talk about teams that get completely utterly destroyed in the first two maps that are not the favorites coming back to reverse sweep a team. Like that never happens. And like
Yeah,
it's great. Like I don't like I was watching that game kind of passively off to the side, and like I saw Optic just destroy Thieves in the map one. I'm like, okay, this is over. And then they destroy the map two. I'm like, okay, this is again over. And then map three, they did better. I'm like, okay, fine. They're just prolonging the inevitable. Optic will finish them off on the hard point. And then they didn't. I'm like, okay, well that's a bit concerning, but oh well, they'll probably finish them off in the search. And then they just didn't. And it's and then then Thieves won that game. And again, I had Optic -1.5 in a parlay. The parlay died with Florida money line, so that was fine anyways. So I was just that was just pride at that point. But the thing of it is like I said this a while ago. Like don't bet on Optic LA Thieves. Just buy Bitcoin instead. And I think that I should never bet on at Optic LA Thieves again. Just never ever again. It's just always bad. It's never a good thing. But
yeah, yeah. Unless there's a way where you can like bet on craziness to happen, because it seemingly always does. Like, I guess you could take like the over 4.5 maps, but like that's never like super fun.
mhm,
But yeah, it's yeah. Thieves are tough to figure out. They have been all year. They're riding pretty high. That reverse sweep is super memorable against a very good team, a team that has a winner's bracket bye. And so now it's like, oh yeah, Toronto, they could beat Toronto, they just beat Chicago. And it's like, I think people underestimate how easily a reverse sweep can happen in this league. Like you mentioned before, like the underdog team going up 2-0 on a favorite, obviously it depends on who's playing who, but like that happens a decent amount of the time. And then it's like, okay, could the favorited team pre-match, now win three in a row? It's like, yeah, of course they could. It's two maps. And it's a best of five series. If we're playing best of sevens, that probably happens a lot less. But yeah, in a best of five series, like you just got to win three in a row after losing two. It's a very specific outcome, but it happens. It's just, yeah, people don't expect it ever to happen because a team goes up 2-0, and in dominant fashion sometimes, and they go, oh, well, this team's chalked, or, they can give up. But really, it's like, just reset, and you're good to go. You got to win three maps. Like, it's not crazy to imagine. So, yeah, Thieves are not the team to pick on right now, or they are the team to pick on. Toronto will beat them 3-0 or 3-1. And if they beat them 3-2, I'll be a little surprised, honestly. If Toronto win
Yeah.
3-2, I'll think that's a win for Thieves for sure.
hmm all right, moving on to the next round here. So let's talk about the winners now. So hilariously, if Thieves were to beat Toronto, we would have a rematch of that insane game. But probably not though. And I actually tweeted I put it on Twitter on LeanTossup when Optic beat FaZe. I'm like, in the future, Toronto will play Optic, and Optic will be favored, and we'll bet on Toronto. And if Toronto beats Thieves, that's very likely what will happen. Based on where that line is with Thieves and Toronto, I very much expect Optic would be the favorite in that match by betting lines at least, because you
Yeah,
have to, because they're gonna take a bunch of Optic money, so they're gonna put Optic as the favorite. You're probably gonna get Toronto at plus money, maybe plus 120 or so. And yeah, we're taking Toronto. I'm
yeah,
taking Toronto at least.
easily, easily. That might be the best bet you could make all tournament, honestly. Because I mean, I'm so happy to see Chicago have success, find like this
Exactly.
level
Yep.
of success. But now it's gonna go way, way overblown in terms of Optic support and like expectations for Chicago. It's like, let's slow down, people. Like, just look at bigger sample size. Here's what I want to talk about: bigger sample size. Toronto Ultra have been a good, like, maybe the second best team in the league for how many months in a row now? Like, people were talking about them as better than FaZe when they beat FaZe way back in whatever that was, April, whenever that happened. But like, Chicago have been a roller coaster of a team, and like their last five matches have gone really, really well. Those are just five matches. Like, do we not forget that they started in losers bracket two majors ago, and it's like, and they got bounced against Toronto, in the last major in winners round one. It's like this Chicago team's very inconsistent, and yes, they may be on a hot streak right now, but that can come to an end, and I think it might if Toronto runs into them, in round two. So that's a match I would be super excited to see. Because hypothetically, I have Toronto versus Chicago as a 60-40, essentially, with Toronto as the favorite, which is going to surprise a lot of people. But again, that just bakes in Toronto has been the better team for a longer period of time, and I'm just relying on that as opposed to Chicago's recent run of success. Because other than that, it's been a lot of up and down for Chicago throughout the year.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm happy to see them too. And a good optic is always good for the game, brings in a lot of viewers. And this game could probably be one of the most watched. And actually, I'm realizing now it's probably going to be the night game. It would be the Friday night game. Whoever plays it. Actually, oh my, that's gonna be two amazing games. You could have Dallas FaZe and Optic, either Toronto or Optic Thieves, and then you have four other teams playing that no one really cares about. But no, no. I mean, actually, New York and Florida will be one of those. New York and Florida probably one of those two other games. So, but yeah, so that's gonna be a good game, and definitely gonna take Toronto there. Dallas FaZe. Um, what do we think about that? I think is like FaZe lost to Optic, and the thing is, I kind of saw it coming. You could see it a little bit if you squinted a little bit because you see them drop a map here or there. I think they dropped a map to Paris. No, they threw out Paris. They lost a. Oh, that's right. They lost a map to Thieves. We're kind of close against Thieves. It was a nice spot to pick against FaZe with that Optic match, especially like the +1.5 or the +2.5 against FaZe. Didn't expect Optic to actually win, but again they can, and again it was around 11 on standoff, one of FaZe's weaker maps, so that's fine. But again, just because Optic beat FaZe doesn't mean that Optic is now one of the best teams in the game, which is I guarantee what the betting lines are going to say. And also, it does not mean that FaZe is bad now. It means that FaZe was ripe for a picking, and it happened. And that
Yeah,
some
and
and somehow Slasher
honestly,
is really, really good on that one, went outside that one window on Moscow S&D.
yeah,
That's
and
also what it means.
honestly, what Chicago did, because we were talking about it last podcast, I was like, because that was right before that week where they played each other,
Yeah,
and I talked about how Chicago kind of needed to be a little weird with the map sets, and they were like, they picked, or I mean, the search and destroys that came through at least were like not what you'd expect just based on straight up like map record for each team. Like Chicago let through a Miami, and I believe they lost it still, but like they were pretty freaking close. And it's like those are the wrinkles you got to throw at Atlanta in order to beat them. And I think Toronto's done a good job doing that against Atlanta all year. Obviously, it took them to a major championship, but like you can't play the game how Atlanta wants to play it, or else you're going to get beat. Like, you have to be a little funky. You got to change things up just enough. And you have to be a really good team. Obviously, the talent, will show up, and Chicago has the talent. Are they better than FaZe any given day? Probably not. But, or every single day, no. But any given day, yes. So I don't know. It's tough. If we get Dallas Atlanta again, you're right. That day with Dallas Atlanta hypothetical and Toronto Chicago, that would be nuts. If Dallas Atlanta were to happen, you have to have Atlanta as the favorite. Obviously, I'd have them winning about 3/4 of the time in a best of five versus Dallas. So it's obviously a big number, but in terms of matchups, like there aren't a whole lot that get closer than that for Atlanta. We saw what Dallas could do against them at the major on LAN just a month and a half ago, and yeah, to get them in a best of five is like right where you want them. So I'm interested to see if this is the match where the line goes, because obviously you have to think Atlanta's the favorite, even though they're the team coming from winners round one. But I don't know. They might be a lot more bettable. Atlanta, I'm talking about. They might be a lot more bettable in this matchup than they will be against Rocker, because that Rocker line is it's a little too high for me. I know that you kind of liked it, but I just don't see it coming down really. If it does, I'll be a little surprised. But FaZe Empire could be a spot where like a Atlanta -1.5 could be a really good play, but we'll have to see where that line ends up.
yeah, that's the thing. That -1.5 could be a good play if you're waiting for like day of. If you see a good map set for Dallas, a +1.5 bet there on Dallas. I'd expect a +1.5 will probably come in about the same as Optic, maybe like a +150 or so. But again, that will be a very interesting line to see. The fact that Atlanta has not ballooned out, like there's been much more movement in the Thieves and Seattle lines than the Atlanta line, might indicate people aren't betting up Atlanta anymore. So, and if they know they're gonna take Dallas Empire money, maybe like I don't think Dallas can be the favorite, but maybe this could be a really close line. So that's something definitely interesting to look out for, especially on when we get those lines Thursday night into Friday morning. Friday, these will be the losers bracket matchups that we've projected for. At least I believe we're all in agreement that subliners will beat Gorillas. At that point, we're then down to Florida and New York. My take on this one: if Florida's the dog, bet Florida. If the subliners are the dog, ugh, I don't know. Maybe bet the dog. Depends on what the line is. If it's like 2-1 or something, then it depends. It depends where the lines are. But like I see myself taking the underdog in this matchup, and depends on how subliners do against gorillas. What do you think?
I think, yeah, you said it right there. It depends entirely, I think, on how New York looks versus LAG. Because if New York win 3-0, easily without Clayster, they show up versus Florida. Actually, I don't even know if that's going to change the line a lot, because so many people just hate LAG and think they're not even a team worthy of being in the league anymore. So a New York 3-0 might not matter, but you will get sort of like reassurance if you want to bet them versus Mutineers that like, yeah, they're still like a pretty good team that could beat Florida any time. If
Well,
they win, if New York wins 3-2, I actually think there could be a lot of value on New York. And that might
yeah.
sound way counterintuitive, but like a New York team that struggles against LAG but still gets the job done, like who's gonna want to pick that against Florida? Like nobody. So I do think you get New York at a pretty big underdog price at that point. That might be worth it. But again, it's a lot of volatility with New York if Clayster's not in the lineup. Um, so that's something to worry about. But Florida, we've talked about all year, they're kind of the epitome of like a volatile team. Like they win against teams they shouldn't win against, and then they struggle against teams they shouldn't struggle against. And one week you're thinking Florida's a top 5 team, and then the next you're like, well, are they really that much better than like London? So this is a tricky game. If we see it, I'll be excited because it could go either way in my opinion. If it's LAG Florida, I will be very upset, but obviously I don't think that's going to happen. Um, so yeah, this might just be a sit and watch for me if things play out how I think they'll play out, where New York looks pretty good against LAG. Where does the line fall with that? I think Florida would be favored slightly, but I don't think it'd be by much. Um, so yeah, I don't know. It's just a wait and see. I just want to make sure that New York beat LAG cleanly um, before I do anything, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's hard. Like if anybody in this matchup is like a plus 200, you take them. I don't know what we're gonna see. This line might open up minus 120, minus 120. I don't know. Part of me, like the thing is, this New York team would have longer to go, right? I mean, they beat Paris 3-1. That was, or no, 3-2. Sorry, that was relatively convincing. Kind of. I mean, Game 5 was a bit of a blowout. They've had bad hard points, which again maybe they're going to be actually no, they're still not competition for LAG. LAG is still by far the worst hard point team in the league, but um no, it's a hard call to say like either of these teams, right? You can make a very good case for New York as okay, well they were just starting out, like they had literally only had 2 days to practice before that Paris game, and then they got obliterated by FaZe. So you can make a very very good case that like okay, well they just needed some more time, and that's definitely true. And you give them another whole week, and yeah, sure, maybe they can actually pull off they can definitely beat LAG. You're get another at least 3 maps out of that, and then maybe against Florida, yeah, maybe they can pull off. I'd assume at this point an upset. Um, but Florida could also pull it out too. So like this game really is 50-50 for me. I have no idea where this could go, and I think it's going to be a finesse pick as to where you see the lines, and if you see some value in the lines, I think it's probably dead even. But if you get someone at like plus money, if you get someone at like a plus 1.5 at plus money on a plus spread, like maybe you bet on that there's some options there, or you just stay away if they're dead even, then you maybe just stay away from this game. Like I don't have a strong feeling as to either or. I just have a strong feeling that there's going to be value on one of these teams, and you bet that team. That's what my is on it. But
Yeah, like here's a good way to think about it, I think, is like let's just say New York beat LAG 3-0. 3-0 or 3-1, either one. Like, is it crazy to think that New York could 3-0 Florida? I don't think it is. Is it
no,
crazy to think Florida could 3-0 New York? Like, no, I don't like I really don't know where this could go. I think it's a really good just sit and watch kind of a game to see how it ends up. But yeah, I don't know. It could be a headache trying to figure it out pre-match. So, um, yeah, I don't know. I'm just excited to see. Hopefully, as long as LAG doesn't like try all of a sudden and somehow beat New York, I'm excited to see this match because I actually think of all the hypotheticals besides Atlanta Dallas, I think this one's pretty likely to happen.
the thing about LAG for me is that like you saw it when they were against Seattle, like just the look of despondency on. They were just so despondent. They're just like we're done. We are
Yeah.
at like after that game 1 when they got blown out, and then after that game 2 when they also got blown out. They were just so down, and just like you could tell they're just done. Like at this point, you're now dragging them out from LA to Dallas, and then basically it's like, cool, you play this game, and then I don't know if they're going to kick around or not. I don't know if they're going to stay and watch the games or hang out with friends, or they just get to go home and see their families because they probably haven't been living with their families for months, right? Like, if
Right.
you're at this point where you're done and you know you're done and you don't want to be there anymore, and it's like, cool, you play this game and you can hop on the next, and they're playing a relatively early game too. You play this game, you hop on a plane, you could be home later that night. Like, I,
Yeah, and then enjoy your off season. Yeah, it has an appeal for sure. And yeah, New York feels like the team that's like they're just not gonna lose to LAG. So Um, yeah, I know we're kind of backtracking talking about that one again, but like New York versus Florida should be an interesting match. I just I have no idea where it's going to end up in terms of a line and in terms of how it'll play out. So it's intriguing, but sorry for the lack of advice, everybody.
Well, I mean, one more just thing we'll say about this: if you're LAG and you're going out there and you've been complete, like you can either have one of two takes on it. You can either be like, we're gonna go out there and we're gonna prove everybody wrong, or you go out there and you have lost all confidence in yourselves, and you guys are preparing yourselves like, hey guys, this could be the last time we all play together. Which it maybe some of them hate each other on this team. I don't know, but it could be like this could be the last time that we all play together on a major team. And it's just like there's either the level of like this could be it, so we're gonna go as far as we can, or this could be it, and then this is just the last time we get to play on a major team, and then that's it. And then that's this is the last time we get to play on it, and like that's it. So it could go either way, but I don't think the subliners go out that way. I don't think they're gonna leave exit round one. But anyway, moving on to the space. I think this is the last game we're going to cover completely in depth here,
Mhm.
because we don't really know the rest of the bracket at this point. London versus worse. We're going with Paris, but it could also be Seattle too. We'll play for it either way. Again, this is just ugly. Like, why do we have to pick a side in any of these games? Like, London seemed to pick it up a bit. They beat New York and they beat Thieves. Paris did not do that. So, I mean, see, actually, they did half of it, but they couldn't pull it off against the subliners. So, like, I guess London's a better team. My model's gonna say London's a better team. They're probably gonna be favored. Paris seems like downtrodden too. I don't know. These are so hard. Why? Like, this is another stay away game too. Like, unless we see insane value on like someone, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, I think yeah, if it's London Paris, I think it's like a definite stay away. I would imagine London would probably be slight favorites, but if it comes down to like, if Paris somehow like just beat the crap out of Seattle, then this could be like even money both sides, and then I think London might be a play, but overall how I think everything will play out if Paris wins, it'll probably be 3-1, 3-2. London will be slight favorites still, and that's kind of what it should be. I have London as a 57% chance to win if it gets to this point. If it's Seattle, if Paris lose to Seattle, I think London could be like a gigantic play. Like maybe my second favorite to like if Toronto and Optic run into each other. I think picking London to just beat the crap out of Seattle, if it's Seattle, could be really good. Because again, that whole LAN, Octane on LAN thing could just continue to roll on. And it's like, hold on, people. It's Paris. Like, Paris ain't a good team. London's also not a good team, but like London have at least shown that they're not in the basement of teams. Like
Yeah.
there's a little bit of a gap, I think, between London and Paris and Seattle and LAG where like London's gonna try. And good for them. And I think Paris and Seattle are gonna try too. I think LAG's in their own camp of just like it's over for us. But yeah, I don't know. If you're London, you're starting in losers round two. You got to win this match, and yeah, you go on a little run. You can make some nice cash. Like it, it makes sense. So I think London versus Seattle, if that's the matchup, give me London. If it's London versus Paris, I don't want any part of it whatsoever.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And even if we're looking at like if Paris is just like all these teams right now are like, oh, let's just take a win as how we can see it, right? If we just take a win from a top team somewhere or something, right? And if even if Seattle's saying that too, right? Like if Seattle's like, cool, we're just gonna wreck Paris, and if Scraps is saying like he's retiring and he's or gonna go do Warzone, maybe he tries to play it out for his last game. I don't know, but at that point, like even if you're Seattle and you're like, ah, let's just see how far we can get. Famous last words, but at the same point though, like what point are you like, cool, we proved our point? Like if you beat LAG, you're not the worst team in the league, congrats. But like, and then okay, cool, you beat Paris. Okay, well, what more is there? Are you gonna beat London? Okay, we beat London. Then you're just gonna get crushed by the next team. And like, if you're London, like London upset New York and Thieves. So like, if you're London, or no, I think Thieves beat. Did Thieves beat London? Thieves beat London. They would have had to beat London, yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
London, yeah, London. I'll have to look back at that. I can't remember now, but no, it's it's a hard call to say, like, the question is how far do you go until they feel like they've accomplished what their goal was? Like how long until you feel like you stuck it to the man? You're like, yeah, we got this. We proved we were better than people thought we were. And the question is when do you hit that wall? And I think in some cases, specifically for Seattle and LAG, I think that wall is pretty close. Paris and London maybe have the wall a bit longer, but I think at a certain point, if you're Paris and you're London, you get past loser Paris. Any of these teams, you get past losers bracket round two, and I think you're like, cool, mission accomplished. We're done here, and then you can exit gracefully because then at that point it's Saturday. It's literally you get through two rounds. It's Saturday, and you're like, cool, this is respectable. We got it on a Saturday. That's fine, unless of course you get
Yeah,
someone on a bad day. But like at that point, then you're still not getting out of Saturday, though. I don't think.
yeah, it isn't it just kind of it feels wrong that one of Seattle, Paris, and London is going to make it to losers round 3. Like that just in my head like shouldn't happen. You know, cuz those 3 teams are all pretty much near the bottom and to think that one of them will make it to Saturday is just like kind of a gross thought. But past that like no, they probably have no chance if they're going to run up against even like a Rocker or a Thieves like yeah, they could beat whoever comes out of that threesome, like, could beat Thieves or Rocker. I don't know about the other top 4 teams, but, like, I don't know. Just that whole bottom part of the bracket is just really gross. I really don't care about how it plays out. Like, if Seattle go on a little run and it's like, oh, yeah, okay, maybe Sam LaRue on land is, like, actually good and like it matters a lot. Like that's an interesting storyline, but if like London comes out and looks pretty good, if Paris comes out and looks pretty good, like I really don't care. Like they're just going to run into somebody at some point and that'll be that and they'll be done. And you're right, it'll be a nice story for kind of whoever goes on that run. Um but overall it's yeah, that part of the bracket down there just don't even worry about it that much. Like if you don't want to watch the matches, like that's totally okay. Like
They're the
because
early one.
again,
They're the early
no,
ones anyway. Only watch with
yeah,
supper. Watch with supper. That's what you do.
yeah. Exactly, exactly.
All right. So let's because we're expressing a lot of uncertainty with like Dallas, Atlanta, and Toronto Optic, and even some more upper bracket. There's no point in kind of projecting through the entire bracket. So let's just kind of wrap up with who are our picks, and I think obviously that kind of comes down to can Atlanta lose this? Is that if you play Atlanta in a best of nine, can any of these teams beat Atlanta in a best of nine? I have an answer to this. What's your answer to this?
I think like can they lose in a best of 9? Like yes, but I mean obviously Atlanta's path to get there is much harder now that they have to start in winners round 1. So what I'll say is I haven't crunched the numbers yet on my tournament simulations to see how often Atlanta win this thing, but it's going to be far less than, any other pre-tournament odds. So I'll say that, but I'll say at the same time, like Atlanta's path for not being in winners round 2 right off the bat is like not bad because Rocker I still think are like the 7th or 8th best team. Like they're in the tier with Thieves in Florida. Like they're all bundled up in the middle. We don't really know what they're gonna do. Minnesota's a good control team, but outside of that, it's like you really worry about their hard point and search and destroy at times. So Atlanta have a pretty nice path with getting Rocker round 1, and then I think of like getting to play either Optic or Dallas. I think I like them versus Dallas a little more. I know we just saw Dallas beat Toronto, but we also just saw Chicago beat Atlanta. So with all that being said, it's like I don't know. It's just the path looks pretty clear for Atlanta. I do think they should be the tournament favorites, despite not getting the bye. How it'll shake out, like I'd love to see Atlanta fall early. Like if Atlanta lose to Dallas, I think this tournament gets super interesting. Um,
This would be the best tournament all year, except for
yeah,
like Major
yeah,
Two. Yeah.
because then we have to watch Atlanta just like beat the crap out of Seattle, or like we get to see one of those matches again, and it's like we just get to see Atlanta just like climb its way back into the final, which would be a very cool storyline. I don't think that'll be how it plays out. I think it's more likely that like Atlanta beats Rocker, Atlanta beats Dallas, Atlanta beats either Chicago or Toronto, and then they're in the finals again. And then it's like at that point, yes, they could lose the best of 9. We saw them lose to Toronto. We saw them almost lose to Dallas, if not for a fantastic map 8 and map 9. So yeah, they can lose. Do I think they will? No, I still think they have to be the favorite. I'm curious to see, and I'll publish these on Twitter once I finish all the simulations. But curious to see who out of Ultra, Optic, and Dallas would have the second best odds, because in my model, Toronto is still the number 2 team in the league despite their recent struggles, especially versus Dallas. So does the round 1 match versus Thieves matter that much? I actually think it might, I actually think Toronto are probably the 4th most likely team to win this tournament,
Hmm.
which isn't a huge surprise, but like them and Optic in Dallas, like they hold a lot of I guess probability in terms of who could come out of this. So I think we have a really good tournament on our hands. It might be the best of the year outside of champs. Just with the way the teams are set up, uh, within the bracket. So I'm super, super excited.
I will say that if we do get like bet to win the tournament at odds and we get something like Toronto plus 1200, like 12 to 1 or something, I'm taking that. I think that's a really
Yeah.
good bet. I will say about Toronto and FaZe and even Dallas in that case, I think you need to be able to beat them in SNDs. You need to be able to beat Atlanta in SNDs. And Toronto, the thing is, Toronto needs to clean up their hard point, and Dallas and Optic are probably going to need to clean up their search. Right now I have Toronto as a better search team than Atlanta, and I guarantee you, if you played a best of 9, because like you have maps that Atlanta are not great at. You have Express, which Atlanta tested against New York and they destroyed them on, but again, that was very weak in New York. Like Toronto will have to play Atlanta on 2 of 3 of Atlanta's worst search maps. They'll have to play them on Express, Standoff, and Miami. So, but assuming Atlanta is the first seed, assuming they are, which at that point, then if they're not, then Toronto can just veto or whatever can veto. If it's Toronto Atlanta, if Toronto's the winners bracket winner, then they could veto the one that they like. But Atlanta will, in a best of 5, would have to play Toronto on 2 of those 3. At which point, like Toronto is good on Express. They lost to Dallas on Express, which is rare, but most people have been vetoing it on them, so they really haven't had a chance to play Express recently. So that might be part of the reason why. But Toronto could get Express, Standoff, and or Miami. Toronto not great at Miami, so probably not Miami. But Atlanta is also bad at Miami too. Like they almost lost to Optic on Miami, a map that Optic barely even plays too. So like it's a lot of interesting things on that. Dallas will have to get better at their hard point. Dallas had a shot against Atlanta. They really did. They really had a shot against Atlanta. If they won either the Apocalypse or I believe it was a raid, they could have taken that major from them. And Optic obviously did just beat Atlanta, but you worry about Optic when you start going deeper and deeper into searches. Like Optic took, like the fact that Optic and Atlanta played what they played 2 search and destroys, and that was what 21 maps because it was 21 rounds because it was 10 and 11, right? Because it was best Optic 165 and then the lost 6-4. So they played almost as many rounds as possible against Atlanta. So we're starting to see a little bit of deteriorate, and like that was really the only time Atlanta was tested. They lost a search to Thieves on Miami. I think if you can take if you can take Atlanta the distance and you can beat them in search and destroys, I think you can knock them off. And I think Dallas can do that. I think Toronto is better to do it in search, but they've got to clean up those hard points. You cannot get like if Toronto didn't get down like what 60, 70 points to Dallas in those 2 hard points, then we're having a very different conversation about the strength of Toronto's hard points. And
Yeah, I completely agree. I think Toronto, although they start in round 1 at this major here, major 5, like they are very well set up for if they make the grand finals. Like their map pool and the modes that they're good at matter a lot, because the one map you see less, or I shouldn't say less frequently, is hardpoint, and like that's Toronto's troublesome area. You see a lot of searches, which Toronto is the best team at right now. Um, and then you see, 2 controls and a best of 9 that weighs out a little more than 1 in a best of 5. So to be a good search and good control team matters a lot in the grand finals, and I think that's part of the reason why we saw Toronto win a major and Dallas come up just short. I do worry, unless Chicago shows us something in the first couple matches they play, that Chicago might make the grand final and do what New York did in Major 3, which was like they got all this hype because they came out of winners, and then it's like, well, actually, you got to play all these searches now, and you're not the best search team, and you kind of falter off, and it's a disappointing series. So there's a lot of hypotheticals with this major, obviously, and yeah, we'll see. Teams really need to shore up search and destroy, control a little bit too, but like Toronto's in a good spot with that map pool if they can get to the grand finals. So you're right about like if they have, the fourth longest odds, it's like 12-1, something like that. Which I don't know, it might be like 1,000 plus 1,200. You're right, somewhere in that ballpark. Like that could be a heck of a play because they win a couple matches and now they're well set up just to get in the finals. And if they do, well, now they're set up to win it as long as it's not phase, which is a big what if. But yeah, if it's not one of those four teams, Toronto, Atlanta, Optic, or Dallas, like I'll be shocked, like
Yeah.
utterly shocked.
It is not impossible that we could have a Dallas Toronto winners bracket final. That's a very real possibility. The more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm starting to buy Dallas against Atlanta. We'll have to see though. Let's see how they do against Minnesota, and we'll see, and where the line is too. Obviously, right? Like if Atlanta's like a -600 favorite, then okay, Dallas. But if it's like -200, then okay, Atlanta. Like it's gonna depend on where that line is. But like I'm starting to like Dallas against Atlanta. The more we talk about this, but we'll have to see. It's going to be interesting, and this has the potential to be one of maybe the best series, like the best major of the year. I really do think it does that. But other than that, we're gonna have this tournament, and then we're obviously gonna have champs. We'll record a show for champs, and then probably we'll record a show for the postseason. I don't officially know when the postseason will start. Will the postseason start on Saturday or on Friday? We'll start on Friday. Like, will Seattle be like, okay, we've released everybody on Friday morning? They'll be like Thursday night.
Yeah,
They
I
send out the tweet
don't.
like everybody's gone.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure if there's rules, that teams have to wait to do any of that stuff, or if the teams that get bounced can just start going. Because like in other leagues, I think most of the time it's like if you're out, you can kind of start making whatever moves you want. So yeah, that'll be interesting to see if we see any
Actually,
big
yeah,
moves right after the year.
it
But
might not be. It might not be roster moves. We might get like a because it's a long time. Actually, it's gonna be like 4 weeks, give or take.
right, that's the thing too. Is like the league probably also doesn't want all this stuff to happen right after their league ends. They probably want to drag it out a little bit to keep interest throughout the COD League for the entire year. So, yeah, we'll see how things shake out at the end of the year. It won't be super sad to see LAG, Seattle, Paris, London, those teams go. I think they've been in the league long enough. We know they're not going to win champs. It makes sense that they're not in champs. Sorry to those teams, but you're not very good. So yeah, we'll definitely record a podcast pre-champs to talk about that. That'll be fun, and yeah, I'm sure we'll have some off-season news to talk about sometime. I don't know, this fall, maybe into the winter. We'll see.
Well, if it goes like last season did, there was just like an immediate. There was like so much roster moves happening, like just literally days after champs.
True,
So
true.
and actually, the more I think about other leagues, they'll fire staff, but they won't make roster moves until after the end of the season. So, I mean, I suspect we might get a league that like yeah, everybody's off of Seattle or like maybe. Well, I mean, if you're even if you're Thieves, right? Are you really gonna sign Oct? Like, you can't really be like, yeah, we're gonna sign Octane, right? And John's like, hey, what about me? Like, I'm about to go play for you for champs, and you're already signing my replacement. Like, nah, that's so. There's different pieces to it. I suspect we're gonna see it after. We probably won't see a lot of roster moves till after champs, but definitely some stuff to talk about when we do champ show. So thank you everybody for tuning in. Still a lot more for us to come for this CDL season, and then gonna be some stuff after that. All right. See you guys. See you guys in a couple weeks.